for Tuesday, May 19th, 2015. It's 6:30. Madam Clerk, would you please do the roll call?
Mayor Coviello,
Here.
Vice Mayor Jonas,
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
Commissioner Ross,
Here.
and Commissioner Watts.
All right, thank you. If everyone would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome Commissioner Watts. Presentations, nothing. Additions, deletions, or withdrawals, nothing. So we'll move into public comment. Anyone wishing to make a public comment, please state your name and address for the record. No public comment. I think that's a first. We'll close the public comment period and move into item 8A, Resolution 2015-34.
Mayor, this is a resolution of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, authorizing the mayor to execute the contract between McKenzie Construction LLC and the Village of Biscayne Park for the Wash Hazard Restoration Project designed for an effective date. Request to approve.
Okay, Madam Manager, would you introduce the item?
Sure. I'd like to walk through some of the history as well as the staff report that was provided to the Commission as well as on our website to the public. An invitation to bid for the restoration of the log cabin was released on April 2nd, 2015. And at that time, we had a mandatory pre-bid meeting on April 15th, 2015, and the bids were due on May 1st, 2015. 3 companies responded to the bid, and they were ABC Construction, Behar Construction, and McKenzie Construction. On page 1 of 6 of your staff report, list out their total base bid, with McKenzie Construction coming in at that time as the lowest bidder. On May 6, 2015, a bid selection committee met to review the submitted bids and make a recommendation to the village manager. The process for this is that sorry.
Keep your gun. Keep your gun.
Wow. Is that the bid selection committee is under a cone of silence, makes a recommendation to the village manager at what time I can review it, accept their recommendation or reject it, and then I make a recommendation to the village commission, at which time, once the recommendation is made, the cone of silence is lifted. The committee was made up of 3 residents, a village employee, as well as a historic building contractor who is also a member of the Historic Curtis House board, which had recently undergone a restoration. The committee met and listened to presentations from all bidders that were in attendance. ABC Construction chose not to attend, so there were 2 bidders in attendance at the time, Behar Construction and McKenzie Construction. And then the committee asked some questions and then reconvened on May 7th, 2015. There was some discussion amongst the committee that the bids could be considered non-responsive due to the fact that the bid documents said that the bid should not exceed $500,000. That $500,000 was based on an estimate that was provided to the village as part of our historic building report by Richard Heisenbottle Architects. So they were asked to come back with a revised bid, essentially 48 hours later, which was noon on Monday, May 11th, and with suggestions for value engineering. On May 11th, the committee met again to review the revised bids. McKenzie Construction came in at $489,995, whereas Behar Construction came in at $565,454. When I saw the revised bids and the suggestions for value engineering, I had a lot of concerns about some of the suggestions, and I reached out to our historic architect that morning and asked him to attend the committee meeting that evening and discuss some of those recommendations for value engineering that were made. He was in attendance at the meeting, and he expressed his concerns over some of those recommendations for value engineering. The committee proceeded to rank the firms. They also had some discussion regarding whether they were responsive or not, if both were responsive or not, being one was still over 500,000. And through their ranking, they ranked highest McKenzie Construction. The committee at that time recommended to myself, the village manager, McKenzie Construction, and also requested that the village manager negotiate with McKenzie Construction. It should be noted that in the invitation to bid that went out, I'm going to quote it, it states that the village reserves the right to reject any or all bids, to re-advertise for bids, or take any other such action that may be deemed to be in the best interest of the village. And it was upon review of the bids committee's discussions, the resubmitted bids, that in consultation with the village attorney, I am recommending that the village not accept the bids as proffered and find McKenzie Construction the most qualified and most responsive firm to complete the proposed scope of work in the best interest of the village. Knowing that I would be making that recommendation, on May 14th, later in the week, myself and our architect, Richard Heisenbottle, met with representatives of McKenzie Construction. At that meeting, we discussed all of our funding sources, which I will be going over, and our intentions with the scope of work. The result of the meeting was that we were to maintain the scope of work as originally presented by the architect and achieve minor value engineering in the course of the project with some electrical and mechanical equipment where possible. Let me explain that process, and that actually has started. Some of those conversations have already started today. McKenzie Construction will submit to the architect some product approvals for items that are like or similar what is specified in the plans, and only with the architect's approval will those proceed. So one example is using one name brand of an AC unit and substituting it for another name brand of an AC unit. And the architect has already verbally approved for that kind of change out, and that saves us a little bit of money. Within the construction and project management world, a form will, once this contract is approved, if it is approved, a form would then need to be filled out by the contractor and approved by the architect for those substitutions. So there's a lot of checks and balances throughout that. The another example is the contracting firm is familiar with another brand of wood doors and windows. It is not a brand that our architect is familiar with, but he's willing to look at it. So this morning he was sent the product approvals and cut sheets for that product, and he is going to review it. So even in the course of this contract, there will be some opportunities for savings, and we're going to work as a team together to achieve those savings. So we are proposing a contract, which is the full scope of work based on our available funds, with an option for a change order in the future once future funds are secured. And I'm going to go through the funding now. As you know, we received the $1 million grant from the state of Florida. Within that grant, the scope of work was crafted by the Department of Economic Opportunity in conjunction with the Department of Historical Resources. They allocated $825,000 for the Public Safety and Administration Complex and $175,000 for a portion of the log cabin restoration. Another $100,000 was appropriated by the Division of Historical Resources. That includes $50,000 from the division with a $50,000 match from the village. The scope of work from the $175,000, which is part of the $1 million grant, is general restoration work, whereas the Division of Historical Resources, that's the $100,000 50-50 match, is a little more specific, and it talks about shake roofing, HVAC upgrades, electrical upgrades, and toilet and bath accessories. Because that's only $100,000, we're only going to do a portion of the electrical and mechanical under that grant and put the bath in a different category because those numbers exceed the $100,000. But we'll still take advantage of the full $100,000. The village also received a grant in the amount of $5,000 from the villagers for a portion of the cost to replace the log cabin windows. And the village commission approved a $350,000 loan for the restoration of the log cabin. That loan closed this past Monday. If you recall, per Resolution 2014-69, the Village Commission agreed for the staff to apply for another historic preservation grant in October of 2014 from the State of Florida Division of Historical Resources. In the course of that resolution, we pledged $50,000 from the village. The amount we applied for was $100,000. We were recommended for full funding through the Florida Historical Commission. That is the commission that reviews the grant applications. It was a 2-day process of webinars for us to go through. We presented to them our project, and we were recommended for full funding. We're number 38 on the funding list. The entire list was recommended for full funding and sent to the Florida legislator. As you're aware, the Florida legislator decided to take a little siesta, and they will be reconvening on June 1st and hopefully have their work wrapped up by June 20th. In speaking to our state lobbyist, as well as some people on the inside at the state, at the Division of Historical Resources, and just getting a general sense of it, the entire grant funding list for the Florida Historical Commission for this category of grants is $13 million, and the general sense is that this will fly under the radar and be approved because it's seen as a program cost. Whether that happens or not, we don't know, but that's the assumption. So the portion of the work, which is about $134,000, that would come out of this $150,000 grant that I was just referencing, we are categorizing that as phase 4. And the contract that we are presenting to you is for phases 1, 2, and 3. Phase 1 will use up the balance of the $1 million grant. Phase 2 will use up the $100,000 50-50 match, Division of Historical Resources grant. $25,000 of that is already budgeted in this current fiscal year's budget of our $50,000 match. And phase 3 would include the $350,000 and 5,000 villagers grant. So those are that is what we are asking for approval of, phase 1, 2, and 3, with the understanding once we receive the current grant that we're going after, we will come back to you with a change order for that phase 4 construction. Your backup provides a graphic breakdown of these phases and cost on pages 4 and 5 of the staff report. The available funds, based on all of those funds that I went over with you, is $780,000. The total project cost is $746,778. This includes the project architect, which was a contract approved by the Village Commission back in December, as well as asbestos abatement. The total McKenzie construction cost, all 4 phases, not the contract that's in front of you tonight, but all 4 phases, is $654,878. $654,878. The total contingency that is left over after all of these numbers is $33,220. So the change in the final scope of work includes value engineering. Some of those mechanical and electrical cost savings that we found, but it also includes the addition of foundation repairs in the amount of $22,050, which is in phase 1, and the inclusion of the commission dais, which is $24,000. That was originally presented in the original bid as an add alternate. We are including that in the lump sum as part of the phase 4. So how did we get from the original base bid of the original base bid of $620,000, add in the add alternate 1 and add alternate 2 at $653,000 to $654,000? That doesn't make sense. And I understand that. That's because we've had some value engineering, which brought the price down, and we had to add in those foundation repairs. And in Mackenzie's final number that came as a result of us sitting down last week, that number is $22,000. So that final number, while it's up $1,000, it's actually down probably a good $20,000 through value engineering, and it then accommodates those foundation repairs, which are very important to the building. Finally, the phase 4 scope of work was determined based on what may be, there's portions of the Phase 4 scope of work that may be delayed if we need to do it. If for some reason we don't get the 100,000, while there's things in Phase 4 that we would need to complete and we would like to complete, there are things in there that can be delayed for future funding, as well as for future match. If we do not want to put up the entire 50,000 match in this coming fiscal year, because we already owe a $25,000 match to ourselves. So that's a total, next fiscal year, we owe ourselves $75,000 match. If we choose to drag it out, we can, there's some costs that we've already identified, and that includes the porch. On the porch, there's a decorative railing going around the porch. It was there in the 1930s, and then it went away, and it's something that we're interested in restoring. That happens to cost $25,000. So there's a way where we can maybe slow down some of the costs. The grant that we're waiting to be awarded would be, the time frame for that money to be used would be between July 2015 and June 2017. So it gives us a little time to get our feet under us if we need to slow down a portion of our match. What I'm saying is if we cannot put the entire $75,000 in our general fund budget this coming year, we might be able to take $25,000 like we did this past year and push it to fiscal year October 2016, because we would have until June 2017 to spend that money. The nice thing about these historic preservation grants is that there's a match, but we can spend their money first and spend our match at our leisure. We still have to complete the project. We're still obligated to spend it, but we don't have to draw down our own funds first. So there's some options as we go through our conversation about this. There's also the cost of the dais, which is $24,000. There's that's something that also can be delayed or redesigned and have more discussion from the commission. The way that it is presented by the architect, and he is in traffic on his way, is that it would be a permanent dais. And the thought process of that was that you would have the electrical and the IT, and it would be a full service dais that was up there. It's taking us into that 2015 technology with our dais. We can have a conversation about that, whether that's a necessity or not. So right there, I've pointed out to you $50,000 in the scope of work that does not necessarily need to be done on the short term, but let's say the medium term. We don't want to put it off for 10 years and have an incomplete project, but if we need an extra fiscal year to come up with some of our match and some of our money, there's $50,000 right there in the project. So I am available for questions as soon as Mr. Heisenbottle. If you have any questions on the scope, I can try to answer it, or I'll defer to him if I don't know the answer when he arrives. We also have representatives from McKenzie Construction. Most importantly to this process is Lynn Blank. He is their project estimator, and we've been working very closely throughout the process over the last week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Manager. Great, thorough job. Do we want to hear from Mackenzie? Do you want to speak, or just answer questions?
You can answer questions, I guess.
You want to do
Okay.
it from the dais? I mean, from the podium.
Okay, all right. Why don't we start with the discussion then?
Okay.
Who wants to go first? Sure.
My concern is on phase 4. What fully is phase 4? Because what I'm reading here is restoration of porch, log restoration to include the chinking and stain, shutters, lighting, and a percentage of the condition costs. And my concern is if we're unable to do that, I'm not sure where it leaves us.
If you go into the backup and you come 5 pages from the back of the backup, it's such a big backup, that's the best way to do it. You'll find a page that says at the top, Schedule of Estimates for Biscayne Park Log Cabin Restoration, Phase 4.
It's
You see
like
that?
page 109, 110?
If you have it online. So this lays out exactly what's in Phase 4, and this is the best way to look at it. On page 4 of the staff report is just a summary, but this is the detail
Okay.
as agreed to by Richard Heisenbottle, myself, and Mackenzie Construction. So Division 1 is very standard. It's spread out throughout the project. These are their general conditions, their costs to be in business to do the project. So if you go down to Division 6, you can see some of the work that's included. That includes the new porch timber works. That's what I was talking about. The railings that go around is $25,000. The chinking and staining is $15,000 in this phase. There's a
Let me just interrupt you.
Uh-huh.
The chinking and staining, that's the logs all the way around the building on the outside, or?
the chinking is the white portion in between
Right.
the
Is that
log-
all the way around the building?
Correct.
Which that has to be done, because otherwise that's what started the water damage.
I'll defer to Mr. Heisenbottle on that. There is some chinking work done from the inside in the third phase, but this is mostly on the porch because that grant from the historical resources is for mostly the exterior.
Right, because I'm concerned with the exterior, obviously, because that's, the elements get there, and I want to, but that's in Phase 4.
Correct. So Commissioner Anderson, in the worst case scenario, let me go through the list and I'll come back to that one because I agree with the chinking. $8,900 for the cabinetry for the new sink. This was a request since we were getting rid of the kitchen to have some kind of service. Commissioner Watts, what do you call it? Like a cupboard. There's a better word. I can't think of the word we've used. And the new dais at $24,000. The new wood shutters. These are they're nice to have. They are part of the original building. You see them when you walk up to the front of the building. There's some windows that need to be recreated once the additions come off. So those wood shutters are included in this, as well as the light fixtures. So what do we need to do out of the this Phase 4 is the light fixtures at $34,000 and the chinking at $15,000.
Now,
That comes to about $50,000, and we're obligated for that for the match.
Now, the light fixtures, is that outside light fixtures or inside?
It's a little bit of both.
So Phase 4, if we don't get the grant, we got to do part of that.
If we
can't
get the
leave it.
grant, the way I see it,
If we, for whatever reason, we don't happen to get it.
I understand, but the way I see it is if we get the grant, we have a $50,000 match. If we don't get the grant, we have $50,000 of work we have to do. So either way, we are obligated to $50,000.
And that's my issue that I have because of the 50,000.
Mr. but we're obligated due to the match of the grant. Mr. Heisenbottle, there was a question regarding the chinking, as if it's a requirement due to water intrusion into the building. Do you have any information on that?
Welcome, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I must apologize for being late, but it was an accident getting onto I-95, and it made it impassable. However, for the record, my name is Richard Heisenbottle with offices at 2199 Ponce de Leon Boulevard in Coral Gables. I believe that the exterior of the building needs to be more than patched. The chinking is cracking virtually everywhere. It's
Right.
popping out everywhere. The air conditioning is going out everywhere. And for that reason, we've used the chinking that we've spec'd chinking that is a bit of a mastic and it will hold up for a very long time. We're confident. We think it would be a mistake not to do that it will only pay the price later on with it, falling out and cracking.
Yeah, I think the discussion that we were having, I believe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it wasn't at all that we didn't want to do it. It was that it's in Phase 4, which we may delay possibly, and we didn't want to delay something that was critical. I think that was it.
That is exactly my concern.
Right.
I can tell you that I work closely with our city manager to come up with how we would structure this under the circumstances. It is one of the things that would be last on the critical path of things to do. I think we all feel confident that at least that we're going to get the grant from the state and that ultimately it will get done.
Well, I'm looking at that's a maybe. And and for us to come up with $50,000 out of next year's budget, that's something else we'll have a discussion on. I'm concerned of making sure we get the things done that need to be done, and then we can be looking at the other items. We may have to wait a year or two and do pieces out of each year's budget. We might. I just want to make sure that we can go ahead and get a solid building out of what was put there, because you came in with an estimate way below that.
There's some chinking of new areas of log that we're putting in that we just simply would have to do.
Correct. No, I'm not
You know,
even
we're
questioning
taking
on
up
that.
a
I'm
whole
just-
section of.
My question is, you know, I'm concerned with that being in phase 4, that's an iffy, where it should have been in some other phases, that's something that needs to be done to maintain the integrity of the building for insects and everything else on the outside.
So what I think is that, you know, something like the new porch railing, something like the dais
Correct.
that's not
All of those could be postponed, as I think you're going to
right.
say.
And so I think what you're
Mayor.
saying is that these other two items, including the electrical and also the chinking, is there something else that we can substitute in phase 4 and put those at more of a critical issue in the early phases, and move something from the phase 1, 2, and 3 that's something similar to the dais that maybe is less critical?
I can give you an example that I understand what you're asking for is a new air conditioner, but we have an air conditioner in there now. Yes, it doesn't handle what's really needed to handle, but it works. And maybe that's one of the items we could be holding off on and replacing at a later date with the proper one. Because structurally, there isn't a big change on that. And I'm just, you know, I mean, I'm sure we can start
That would be,
nitpicking all
well,
of
the
this.
other,
Mr. Mayor,
the other items are
I
not.
think Christian needs to opine on that.
Okay. All right. One second.
Regarding the air conditioner, we have had to have that repaired so many times this year already. It's undersized for the area that it's doing. It leaks. It's going to be a problem with water damage or continual repair. So that really is something that we do need to address pretty quickly.
We are in fact putting 2 air conditioners back into the space, which will give us some flexibility to air condition the space with a low load of people, and then with a higher load of people like we might have on a full commission agenda evening.
But what I'm looking for is things like the mayor was saying. What other items can we move into phase 4 that are not that critical? And take things that are critical, like
Certainly, the
Take
railing and
care
the
of
dais fit into that picture. It's
Right.
important, but we would make do with tables. If I know you would.
right. I mean, we've
You're
been
doing it now
this for a lot of years
right.
here.
By the way, the new dais is very nice, and we got a bargain price on it, I might add. But so take it quick. But nonetheless, there aren't a lot of other items that we can just say that we can do that to. Christian has just told us a little more about the history of the AC. Normally, we would say that we could postpone the AC and maybe just change out the unit at the.
Because, because what you estimated this cost of doing all of this is so different than what we're coming up with.
Let me expand on that for a moment. The biggest, there may be some little hits here and there, but the biggest hit on the project cost-wise is the need to go below the floor and enhance the structure below the floor. What we found when we looked underneath the structure is that it was propped up on cinder blocks, and that it would not meet the code requirements of a 100-pound live load for an assembly occupancy. And some night, there's going to be well over 100 pounds on that floor, and we got a responsibility there, all of us. So to enhance that floor, we've designed new concrete pads that reduce the span of the logs that are there. The logs are in good shape, but to reduce the span on those logs so that they can carry more load. But to get to the ground, the earth, and put that in, we have to take up the floor that's there. And there's 2 layers of floor that are there that we didn't know about. And while we're going to do our best to salvage it, you know, that is, that along with the taking up the floor, the putting back the floor, and the pouring of that concrete is the biggest hit on the job. That's the big unknown that we didn't see at the time of the estimate. The other things that, of course, we didn't include in the estimate was the dais and the other cabinetry. There's one other cabinet that we've added
Right.
for the kind of casual little snack service that you guys have typically offered outside of the meetings. The cabinet and the sink made good sense. We can postpone the cabinet and the sink, that's for sure, as well. That is in the base bid, by the way.
Correct, but that's in phase 4.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm looking for is anything we can go ahead and pull out of the other 3 phases that we can move stuff in.
Right, and what he said is there really isn't anything that's not critical, is what I'm hearing.
I'm having a tough time finding the right thing to pull out.
Okay.
You know,
There's not much in the first 3 phases that is interchangeable. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm ready to listen to anyone's suggestion also. I just, you know.
Okay. Hey, Gavin, if you just we're recording it? Sure. Thanks.
I would say that the chinking from the interior.
I'm sorry. Just introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. Gavin McKenzie, owner of McKenzie Construction, and resident of the village as well.
Great. Thank you.
That the interior chinking will at least prevent some of the AC leakage that was mentioned and bug intrusion, things of that nature. And if we had to do chinking on one side, the idea was do it on the inside so that you can move back into the space and have a clean space to work and not be disrupted by contractors coming in at a later date and doing that chinking. So I just wanted to reiterate that point.
But now, if you did the chinking just on the outside,
Yep.
would there be a difference in cost of the chinking on
No,
the
I think
inside
it's
versus-
very similar in cost because the square footage is similar. What it's going to do by by chinking the inside, it's going to allow you guys to move back into the space, the building department move back into the space and not be disrupted.
No, the place is going to be empty. It's going to be for meetings.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay.
It's
So,
going to be a
in
completely
any
empty
event,
area.
whatever the use is, we won't have to be disrupting the interior of the space, and the cost is very similar inside versus out.
So in theory, we could have the outside chinking done first, and then later on do the inside chinking, since
could
most
do
of the
that
time
also.
that building's going to be
Yeah.
empty.
We could do that also. I mean, it's cost-wise, it's probably
Right.
6
But yeah, cost-wise,
So
it's
that
going to
would
be
move
very
it-
similar.
So that would move that off of phase
If we
4
wanted to-
into one of the other phases.
Contrary to what my good contractor here has suggested, I think I would do the outside first for the sake of water penetration. The inside is in better condition today. If we walk the inside today, it's in much better condition. So, I mean, conceivably, we could live with it if we really had to.
Right,
Patch a few
right.
spots and live with the interior chinking. The outside chinking,
But again, if the idea is to reduce cost, there's not going to be much of a cost change there.
Well, the main thing is what I'm looking at is trying to reduce or put phase 4 where we can, is if the money doesn't come in, we can go ahead then and over a few years do pieces of it out of our budget
Right.
on phase 4. I mean, we want to get all this done, but we need to be able to have the money to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all pretty critical. So, pushing something else, swapping something from the first 3 phases into phase 4, like we said, I don't see anything that's a luxury item here that doesn't need to be done to finish the project.
Okay. All right, and I mean, it is $15,000. I mean, the electrical is double that.
We can, that's what I'm saying, we can, if you go through the whole thing, I'm sure we can come up with moving back and forth with certain items that we'll have very little left in phase 4 that's a must do.
Okay. All right, anything else?
No, that's all.
Okay. Other comments? Who wants to go next? Commissioner Jonas? You go.
Yeah, the village was a small collection of homes until 1933 when it incorporated, and the log cabin, I think, was not built too terribly long after that. If I remember correctly, there were less than 100 homes in Biscayne Park at that time, and it's the same log cabin that has served us for 82 years. since 1933, or a little less than that if it was built a year or two later. It never has gotten proper care, and it's not terribly surprising that it's not in very good shape. But it's certainly fair to say that at this point, with now about 1,300 homes and a much more sophisticated task of municipal management, that it would be considered unreasonable to expect that we wouldn't really have to do this project, including the annex building. So I think we should assume that we're doing the right thing, and that it costs what it costs, and whatever it costs, that's what we have to pay. Having said that, I would have to say it seems to me very disappointing to find out how far from the real cost the initial estimate for the log cabin restoration is. I don't know why it's so, in a sense, wrong, but it seems that it is. And again, it's a task that we have to do, and whatever it costs, we have to pay. In terms of Phase 4, I do think there are two reasonably discretionary items, and they're expensive. I don't know when the railing around the porch was removed, but it's not there now, and we live without it, and I wonder if it's fair to say maybe we don't need it for $25,000. In terms of the dais, the log cabin building will be used for more things than just commission meetings. This is an awful lot of money to pay just to have a place to have commission meetings. It'll be used for a number of kinds of functions. Many of them will probably not require anything like a dais, and a dais might even be an obstacle for some kinds of functions. I can imagine that we might wind up renting it out for sort of open parties or weddings or something like that. And frankly, I would be disinclined to want to spend $24,000 for a permanent dais that will be in people's way. I would rather we just do what we're doing here and save that $24,000 as well. So now we can save about $44,000. I'm sorry, $49,000. The other thing in terms of our match is we are so far over budget in terms of the amount that was given to us, and that we're required to contribute, in the sense that we now have to borrow $350,000, that I think if we saved $49,000, it's not an amount of money that we would then have to find some way to spend somewhere else or within 10 years. So I really would rather see us just do what we should do for the structure, to make it a proper and nice structure, and lose the railing around the porch, and not put in the expensive and permanent dais.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Jonas. Just before we start, I want to acknowledge Alexis from Commissioner Hayman's office. So thank you for coming. This is a big night for us, and I appreciate you being here. Commissioner Ross.
Just a couple of sort of general comments is when we embarked in this process, I don't think anyone had the idea that the $1 million was going to cover all of our expenses to build a new building and to restore the log cabin. I think that early on we realized that it was going to take more than the $1 million that we got as a gift from the state. And even knowing that, all along the process, residents and even some of our commissioners have said, we want to do this right. This doesn't happen every day. It was last built 80 years ago, and so we want to make it last another 80 years or more if we can. So I feel committed to doing all 4 phases of what's presented here. I understand that tonight we're only approving phase 1 through 3 in the base contract. But it's interesting the way the manager, and I'm sure with your assistance, broke it down in the different phases, because that 4th phase would essentially be funded by the $150,000 in the pending grant. We're not sure whether we're going to get it or not, whether we get it or not. But in either event, we have to commit $50,000 to complete the base of the project, or if that grant comes in, to be able to do all 4 of the phases properly. So it's going to be hard to, sort of piece and break off different things that we're not comfortable with today. I have full faith that we're going to get the $150,000, and before we start saying let's cut corners, I'd rather be committed to do the whole thing. if we get squeezed, then of course we will have to find savings. And I understand that even throughout the process, you'll be working together to find perhaps a less expensive product that still meets the quality that Mr. Heisenbottle has worked in his plan. The only thing that I would, and I have commented to the manager on, is with regard to the resolution itself, I would like it to be a little more specific as to what the village's commitment, the village's input is, because it's more than the 350 that's stated. I'd like to see us drop in there also the matching grant portions, the portions of the grant that we're matching, so it's clear where the funding's coming from.
Okay, anything else? Oh, you can, if you have something else later. You can. Commissioner Watts?
Mr. Heisenbottle, I had a question about the change in, or maybe both of you, the change in the wood from South Florida pine or Florida pine to Miami-Dade pine. What was that?
There was an alternate, an add alternate for the floor.
Mm-hmm.
To use an add alternate to use Dade County pine or hard pine as it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And in the logs, that's what that add alternate, the last add alternate was for. It's a great wood. It's hard. It's insect resistant. It is. I mean, it is just fabulous. It's also very expensive, and we're going to stain it. And so we're using southern yellow pine that is pressure treated on the outside. We just thought that going to the Dade County pine for logs, the river reclaimed logs, was probably just unnecessary, since we're going to stain it and it's going to look brown anyway.
Okay.
Other than that, though, if I might comment on, I really do believe that what we've done, what we have in the scope of work, produces a building that everyone, a restored building, that everyone is going to feel very, very good about when we're done with it. We have not tried to cut every corner. We've been judicious and I think smart, but it is a building that, with any level of tender loving care after all of us are gone, will last another 80 years. It was constructed reasonably well, considering, and the enhancements that we're making to it, both structurally and to repair rotten wood and the deteriorated roof and all of the other improvements, are, I think, doing it right. And I would encourage you to get one shot to do it right. And I suggest that, and you never regret it. And when you look at that over 80 years, when we look at even our $50,000, and I'm not saying that we do or we don't try to recover that, but when we look at that over the next 80 years that this commission and this town is going to have that building and have it as a source of pride as well, it becomes a small price to pay over the time that the building really exists.
Thank you.
I was just curious, though, that the wood that you would choose to use now is strong and serviceable. I mean,
yes, the wood that we're using is perfectly fine, and it's now we still have the hard pine on the floor on the inside. That'll hopefully we can reclaim as much of that as humanly possible and salvage it. It's going to look old. It's going to have nail holes in it, but I can tell you when it cleans up, it's going to be pretty fabulous. So.
Yeah, you're estimating that we'll be able to salvage 50%?
That's what we've estimated right now.
Okay. If it's not possible, how much money?
It's how much we salvage depends on. I don't think we're going to find that it's rotted underneath there. It's a matter of how delicately and how much time we take to pull up the floor on top of it and then pull up this floor. If we were to just send in a demo contractor and say salvage that, the hammers are flying and if you send in 3 good finish carpenters and they use nail pullers, you can salvage more. So we're going to work closely with everyone here, and I know our contractor is going to work closely with us to see how much we can possibly salvage.
There's a beautiful pine floor that was on a diagonal that's underneath the oak that's there now. And when we did the cutout to
That's the
see
one
the
we're trying to-
foundation, it's like sandwiched together. So it's really how easy is it to pull up that oak? But you could just tell that pine, even from the cut through on the side, they're beautiful planks. So it would be in our best interest to save them and deal with, like Mr. Heisenbottle was saying, those imperfections.
One other question, Mr. Heisenbottle. At the last meeting that you attended here with the committee that was reviewing the bids, you talked about the changes in lighting and how you had specifically designed the lighting to suit different uses for the village hall. Have you changed any of that, or is the lighting the same?
There are two things that we were evaluating after that meeting. We have a substitution request that they've already sent us on the air conditioning. Instead of the train units that we specify, we've got a price savings if we go to Ream, and that came in this morning, I think.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I'm sure my staff has already sent it out to our engineering consultants. The other request is relative to the wood windows, an alternative manufacturer who we've never heard of before, but we're going to research that one as well as a method of potentially saving us some money. On the lighting package, we may also be able to save some money. We have not had the opportunity to review what was the alternative package. Before we accept it, we got to figure out what it is. And the lights that we chose were all LED, which obviously is going to save money for a very long time. The good news is you won't touch the light for the next 12 years, no matter what. So there's nobody going around, maintenance going around trying to screw in light fixtures. They just work. It also has a bit of an uplight and a downlight to it.
Yeah.
And part of that is so that we, in the evenings especially, we start to illuminate that ceiling a little bit, and people can appreciate the ceiling as well as the light on the floor.
Okay, so any other lighting package that we choose would still have those features?
That's why we need to review the proposed package. It was a potential $10,000 savings, and we're prepared to take a good look at it, but we need to see exactly what it is and make sure it's really apples to apples. Whenever contractors get bids at the last minute from this or that subcontractor, they don't always get to evaluate them and make judgments on them. So we need to see the cut sheets for every light and just make sure that it's really an equal.
And Mr. Heisenbottle, before you got here, I explained the process of those kind of change orders where they submit it to you in a form, you sign off on the form, and no changes are made without your consent throughout the process.
The object is to make sure that what's being substituted is really an equivalent. So,
So let me just ask one question. To complete Phase 4 in next year's budget, we will have to do a $50,000 match, right?
Correct.
A $25,000 match.
That we already owe for an existing bid.
Okay, and that 25. Okay, so 25,000, and then the debt service for the loan is.
It's $32,000 a year. Based on the discussion, some of the discussion that was just had with the railings and the dais, that 25,000, half of the 50,000 might be able to be put off until the October 2016 budget. However, I would caution you, I don't want to mislead you, that that's a decision you would make at a later date, but instead, that if we accept the grant, we are obligated to provide that match.
Okay, so if we took the dais out and put it for another day, that's $82,000, right? 25, 25, and 32?
Correct.
Okay.
This year's budget already carries $25,000 in it.
Okay. Because, the importance of this project cannot be understated. I agree, this is our crown jewel, and we should do it once, we should do it right. But at the same time, we need to be responsible. We can't be, setting ourselves up for failure. So the Phase 1, 2, and 3 is what we would be approving tonight. Phase 4, we're not approving yet until we have the funds available, correct?
Right, Phase 4
explicitly states it has to be a change order, so it would be coming back to you so that you could make that decision later on if you wanted to, based on
Okay,
what
but,
you
but
know.
to the extent that we, you know, we do not get the grant, is the building going to be operable through phase 1, 2, and 3? I mean, you know, I understand the chinking and the dais and the cabinet, but what about the electrical? I mean,
The electrical's all in.
The lighting is included in phase 4.
The lighting is, I don't.
Lighting is included in phase 4,
Yeah.
which is 34,000 as presented.
In other words, I want to make, you know, I understand putting things off, but if we're going to put it off and we're going to have a building that's not really operable, then that's an issue. So the electrical is necessary, correct?
Without a doubt. With-
Okay.
Whether it's this lighting or that lighting, yes.
Right.
Without a doubt.
So I would feel more comfortable if we put the electric back as more of a critical item and found something to move to phase 4. That way we know if we're not moving forward with phase 4 yet, which I'm confident we will move forward with it, it's just when, that at least we have a building that we could use.
Well, that's what I was talking about.
I think that in any event,
Put it in, you take it out.
we're gonna have to come up with at least $25,000 additional, and that will cover the critical items of phase 4 that we need to get accomplished in order to complete the grant, the $1 million.
Okay, so you're saying with the 25,000, we have to come up with, that's for the 50,000?
Right. Right, so even though we're not,
50,000 match, though.
Mayor,
Yes.
maybe what you could do here, because remember, to get the $100,000 grant, we have to associate it with something. We're associated with phase 4,
right,
okay? The 100,000 that's approved but not signed off on. So what you can do here as direction is to say, if, it should be the end of June, but whenever the time is, if that is not signed off, that is to be brought back, so the electrical can be approved separately as a phase 4A, something like that. Because how I drafted the phase 4 was that it's not only contingent upon us getting the grant, it's also based on the sole discretion of the village. So we could come back and say, you know, we're not doing phase 4, the full phase 4, we didn't get the grant, but we're approving the electrical, and here's the 35,000, 34,000 for the electrical.
Right, but that still leaves us with having to come up with the money for that electrical.
You're gonna need to do that either now or later.
right.
There's not, I mean, Mr. Heisenbottle stated, there's not a lot of fluff in the first 3 phases to pull anything out right now. And I also have to caution you, with all due respect to the commission, he's your professional and your contractor's your professional, and I think making scope changes from the dais could put us in a precarious situation when it came to actually doing the work.
Yeah,
Right.
but I'm not asking to change the scope. I just want to make sure that, I was trying to move things around so that we have.
But that's what I'm saying, all of these breakdowns, some of them are contingent on other items.
And I think that as they're also looking at product changes, whatever the contractor is suggesting for a substitute product, there's gonna be a savings in those different elements that, you know, will roll into phase 4, kind of. The funds will roll into phase 4.
Okay, let me just, all right, why don't you speak and then, Noah, if you want to come up.
My concern is, right now, we already have set aside a certain expense from our upcoming budget that still haven't even worked on yet. And now we're adding another expense to it. I'd be curious what is going to be cut out of that new budget that maybe we feel we need. I mean, you know, one of the things, our landscaping that people look at, we want to keep a fair amount of money into the budget for that. So we keep adding more money that we're going to be subtracting out of this forthcoming budget and obligating ourselves to now. I'm not too sure what that's going to be, you know, what's going to be happening. Also, we originally started off with 1.1 million. That's a lot of money. And we realized that wasn't quite enough. But if you look at it, we're running on almost 50%. If you add up all these numbers, it's close to 50% overrun from that 1.1 1 million, for these two projects, these overall projects. And I got an issue with that. I think we need to cut back. I mean, we're spending more than what we have, and we need to take a look at this again.
Yeah, but I think, to the extent that we're gonna put landscaping again, what do we put in this year's budget for landscaping improvements? 27,000. I mean, to the extent that we need to sacrifice that for 1 year to do this project right and do it correctly, which is gonna have such a lasting impression on the village. This is a once in a lifetime thing. So, to sacrifice one year of landscaping, I think it's worth it to do this right and once and correct and be done.
I'm just putting an example, that was just an example. I don't know what other things that are out there, and the citizens want to see more landscaping as it is, and then go ahead and tell them, no, we're not gonna do it, but take a look at this wonderful building. But we did take out the $24,000 dais out of it. I mean, they'll go berserk on that. I mean, that's not right. We need to go ahead and address and be careful of how much we're obligating next year's budget that we haven't even looked at yet.
Okay. All right, any other comments? But this is just to be clear, this is phase 1, 2, and 3 is what we're approving.
I understand that.
It's a great shame that 75 years' worth of commissions didn't do anything about this building, but the buck stops with us now.
Okay, Commissioner Ross.
I was just going to suggest, because some residents came in after public comment was closed, and if there is anybody that wants to make a comment.
Yep.
I appreciate the indulgence. Thank you.
Gary, do you want to also speak? I know you came in a little bit late.
Unless you want me to.
I do. I do. I like to hear from everybody.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's
Noah Jacobs, 1090 119th Street. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Heisenbottle, and apologize, Mr. McKenzie, for coming to the meeting. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm curious, what exactly needs to be done in regard to the historic nature of the building to retain the historic designation that we're talking about? That's question number one. Question number two, we're talking about, as Commissioner Anderson spoke, we're talking about an awful lot of money. And we got an awful lot of money from the state. What we're focusing on the renovation of the log cabin. Forgive me, but what percentage of the money we're spending is on the renovation of the log cabin? Because I'm not real clear on that. And finally, it is a very important task that you all are undertaking, and it is much appreciated. But do understand that, A, you have a budget season for next year that you're going to look at, and you're going to encumber yourself to some degree in that regard. And B, you all have a duty and a responsibility to represent not only the community as a functioning entity, but also the residents and homeowners of the community that are eventually going to have to pay, as you all will, for every single dime of the loan service, the matching funds, whatever it is you want to call it. I guess my two main questions are, what percentage of the money you're spending is going to the renovation? And what exactly needs to be done in regard to the historical nature of the building to make certain that it remains historical? Thank you
Okay,
very much
all
for your
right.
time.
Thank you, Noah.
Gary Kuehl, 777 Northeast 111th Street. Somewhat in defense of Mr. Heisenbottle and his estimate, it's a particularly difficult building to get an accurate estimate, make an accurate estimate of. It's very difficult. renovation, reconstruction projects, remodeling, it's difficult. But it brings me to another point. The fact that there is that variation between the estimate and the bids brings to mind the kind of variations that you're going to encounter when you do this building. And if I heard the village manager correctly, we have a 5% contingency. It was $33,000.
It's only a 5%.
Typically, in this type of work, which I do all day long, we recommend to clients on renovation projects that they have a 15 to 18% contingency. 18% for renovation projects is the national average. So while I'm absolutely in favor of doing the job, doing it completely, I'd like to see the community get behind some fundraising events, see what the community really contribute to this. I think it'd be a wonderful project for people to be engaged in. I do want to throw out the cautionary flag that I think $33,000 is going to disappear in a heartbeat. So I really think that the village manager and the commissioners need to keep that in mind. I don't think you're well prepared for what I think this may eventually cost. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Anyone else? George?
George Marinoni, 118th Street. I had a question. You said that you are replacing, I don't know if I understood right, the outside wood for pressure-treated wood. Is that instead of Day County pine?
There are a number of areas where the exterior logs have to be filled back in because they were taken out years ago. And it's where we're filling those back in, you know, that I don't believe have the luxury of choosing the Dade County pine, which is wonderful, but you know, that was a judgment decision that, you know, we put the number out there, we tested it, and I think the manager and I agree that that's a luxury we just don't have.
Okay, this is the question that I had. My experience with pressure-treated wood, especially for outside, is that it shrinks. If it's being pressure-treated, it's not dry. It's not like Day County pine that is solid, it will stay the same size. So when it shrinks, the chicken is gonna have gaps. Also, is prone to bending and to cracking. Have you considered that? Maybe it's cheaper to buy the right wood that is the same because it's only an area that is not that big, right?
Okay, George, you want to make your comments and then we can respond? Is that, you're good?
That was my
Okay,
main
perfect,
question.
thank you.
And one more thing, I support Vice Mayor Chona saying, if you want to save money, save on things that are not fundamental for the structure, like more cosmetic, like railings, the days, whatever.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Mayor, if you see it fit, I will respond to, I guess, were two questions that were relative. One was to the historic side of what we're doing, and to this question. George, if I may call you George, you may certainly call me Rich. In the best world, I would use the Dade County pine all day long. But you know, we've seen the issues with these sorts of logs before, and we've used southern yellow pine, pressure treated, and since it's a log, and since it's big, and since these areas are relatively small, and also because the chinking that we're using is effectively elastic. It's like a sealant. It's like, think of it as an elastomeric sealant for a moment. It's going to have a lot more give to it. So if we get a little bit of checking or shrinkage, I'm really betting the farm that the chinking is going to stay right there. To the other gentleman's question, and it's a lot of money. I don't remember what the ad alternate was. Maybe Gavin does, but it's like $7,000 or $7,500, and it's just
9,000.
9,000. There were okay. So it's worse. It was a luxury that while I was certainly committed to doing everything on the job correctly, it's a luxury that I would personally recommend we pass on. to the other gentleman's question about what are we doing in, from the historic preservation perspective, we're certainly not, we're doing everything we can to enhance the building's historic integrity and return the building's historic integrity and affect the maintenance changes to the building that I think anyone who read the early reports would agree, anyone who uses the building would agree are necessary. We're certainly not doing anything that would cause the building to be delisted, to come off the register. First of all, the state of Florida, who gave us these grants, is not going to let us do that. The local preservation office is not going to let us do that. This is an enhancement project. We're undoing some things that were done in the past that did compromise the historic integrity of the building. So I think go with comfort in that realm.
All right, thank you.
Also, just to expand on that by way of information for the public that may not know, Mr. Heisenbottle and the manager and I were before the Historic Preservation Board. Staff at the county level reviewed the plans as were drawn up by Mr. Heisenbottle, and the Preservation Board approved the plans. So, you know, we're getting all our T's crossed and having the right approvals throughout the process.
Okay. Yes.
One more question.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Madam Manager, do you have the percentage of total monies used towards the new annex? And
I just did a quick
Yep.
math based on where we'll end up with the annex and using the number of it, 780,000 for available funds for this project, and it's 46% on this project.
Okay. So roughly half.
Yeah, and just also by way of explanation, when early on, I would say maybe 3 years ago, we started looking at what kind of space we needed for an annex building, and I believe it was Gary Kuehl who worked with our then manager. It was even before Heidi was here. The estimate that was given, that came up with for restoring the log cabin and building new space was somewhere near $1.5 million. So it's proving out to be close to that number.
It was a bigger space though.
Dave?
Yeah.
Can I make a motion on this?
For discussion, yeah.
Yeah, I want to move to accept phases 1 through 3
I'll second
as
that.
proposed.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Vice Mayor Jonas, second by Commissioner Ross. Any further discussion?
I'm just worried of how we're going to pay for this. And as Mr. Kuehl said, our contingency is low, and I have a few questions.
Wait a minute. Pay for what? Phase 1, 2, and 3? No, we're fine with 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah,
You're concerned about phase 4.
Yeah, but I think we're fine with that. Well, I just think the numbers are confusing to anyone. But phase 1, 2, and 3 would cost $520,333, correct? But then there are more fees, like Mr. Heisenbottle's fees that have to go into that. Heidi, could you help me out?
No, Mr. Heisenbottle's fees are covered under another contract. That Mr. Heisenbottle's fees come out of that 780,000, which is referenced beginning on page 4 of 6 and page 5 of 6. He's part of the overall 780,000 total available funds.
Okay.
We are probably about 65% through his contract anyways with paying him out. I was
Okay.
just looking at those numbers today.
Okay, so the first 3 phases, I just want to be clear on this, are, I know we went over this afternoon, but
No problem.
it's like I'm looking at them fresh again.
Yeah.
Was $520,333. But what we've got coming in is we've got $175,000 from the Florida.
We have
I-
82,000 left
82.
of the 175,000.
Okay,
Mr.
82.
Heisenbottle's fee of 89,000 plus our asbestos abatement is coming out of the 175,000
Okay,
as well,
so then now we've got $82,000 plus the $100,000 from the preservation grant,
which is the 50/50
which is the 50/50, plus the $5,000
plus the 350.
and the 350. So we've got 7, 8, 187 plus our 350. 7, 8, 5, 13, 3, 4, 5. So we've got enough money the way it is now to cover phases 1 through 3.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
That's I have $537,000.
Yeah, same here.
Yes.
So it's just that how much money to do phase 4 and how much we will have to do to find the money for the remaining Phase 4.
Correct.
And cover our bills next semester, which is a serious thing.
Right, but phase 4, we can definitely back out the dais
I know.
and
Cabinetry?
and the cabinetry. And
And the
railing, I'm
shutters,
sorry,
and the shutters.
and the shutters. So what is that?
The shutters are not going to back out.
Mm-mm.
In an emergency, they would back out. But from a preservation perspective,
Yeah.
the State Preservation Office expects to see those shutters there. Can I convince folks to maybe back off on the railing issue if we absolutely had to? Probably.
I think we're also talking about delaying
Yeah,
with
not-
the
Yeah,
best
delaying.
case scenario, we
Yes.
get the grant. Don't forget with that grant, we have until June 2017 to complete the work. So if we have to slow down,
We can.
we can, because we will not have to be in compliance with the grant, which is Phase 4, until June 2017.
Yes.
I don't think we're talking about nixing it completely.
My concern is phase 1, 2, and 3. That's where the majority of the work is going to happen. And that's going to be where the probably unforeseen things are going to be coming up with that will eat up that 5% real quick. We might be fortunate enough that maybe we're going to be able to save enough by our contractor offering different items at a savings, and we may not come up with unforeseen things. But that's going to be really telling us as we go through phase 1, 2, and 3 of what's going to be happening in phase 4.
My worry is if we go forward, I think we do need to do this. I think it's important. We'll never get $1 million again. We're in the middle of the process, and I think we should do a good job of the log cabin. It deserves it. But I think that we can wait. My worry is burdening the village with this kind of a debt, or taking money out of reserves, or money that should have gone. I think we've got to be creative about fundraising, though I don't think that we'll get all the money that we need by fundraising, but we do have to make some efforts to do something, because it just worries me to take on this kind of a responsibility on behalf of the village.
No, I agree.
Call the question.
One minute. So, but this all assumes that we do not obtain the grant.
Yeah, that's the
And when will we find that out?
By the end of June. We would have known around the beginning of June like we did last year, but the legislator took a break. The governor has to have the budget signed by July 1st, so he should have the budget on his desk. My understanding is by June 20th to meet all the state
Okay.
timelines.
So, all right, so if we don't get it, we move forward with 1, 2, and 3, we get everything done, we pull out the things that are not essential in 4, we do the electrical, which will make the building suitable. We're only, in the meantime, we fundraise. The worst case scenario, if we need $20,000, $30,000, we could, I know it's a dirty word, but pull it from the reserves. Worst case scenario. Absolute worst case. We're not, we're close. But we're not, the only thing we're doing tonight is 1, 2, and 3, and we have the funds there, so.
Mayor?
Can I ask?
Yes.
Yeah, Heidi, this afternoon we spoke about that, and that there could be a possibility that not taking anything out of the reserves, but just not putting in as much as we have done in the past, because
We're
we did.
waiting for our audit right now to be completed. Based on our finance director's projections, we're looking at between, I believe, 90 and 94,000 as a savings from this past fiscal year, which would go to the reserves. So there could be an opportunity to not diminish our reserves, just not put as much as we have saved into the reserves. And I know that's a dirty word, but there's an option there where we would still maintain at least our 17%, if not more, per the GASB of the reserve balance, but at the same time, not take a hit.
Okay, let me ask you, Mr. Heisenbottle, Gary said that a log cabin, or maybe it was just a restoration project, is difficult. This building in particular is difficult to analyze. And so I do have a concern over the contingency, but isn't it almost, in a log cabin, there's nothing hidden behind the walls because you see the walls. Mm-hmm. And so I want to know, with respect to the foundation and underneath, which is really the only hidden space that you have, was that fully examined? Are you confident that there's not going to be a huge bump up?
We may find some rotten wood But the good, like you said, the good thing, Mr. Mayor, about this entire building, as opposed to Gary, many of the others that you or I have to deal with all the time, this is all exposed to view except,
Right.
for the most part, what is under the floor. And we think we've got the under the floor work properly covered. A lot will depend on how much material we can salvage on the finished floor, but other than that, I have a great deal of confidence. Yes, I would love to have gone in with a 15% contingency, but it is a building that pretty much lays itself out to us and is more visible.
And Mayor, if I can also give you a glimpse into our conversation when we met with Mackenzie Construction, we went through this foundation issue with them, and they were looking for ways to cut costs on the foundation way and fix, and the way that it's being presented is not a way that cut costs. So they're opening it up completely. So I feel confident that the way that they're proceeding as prescribed by our architect and the way they're proceeding to fix the foundation, any issues will be addressed within that budget.
Okay.
Dave?
All right, yes.
When somebody calls the question, you're not allowed to ask them to wait. You then have to vote on the motion. You can vote it down if you want to
All
talk
right,
some
so
more.
we'll call the question. Yes.
Just for direction purposes, as I hear this motion, as I understand it, you're willing to approve the item, which includes the resolution, and Commissioner Ross has a good suggestion to clarify all the money. And what I also would do, because Phase 4 is in that contract, is even articulated further that part or all or none of Phase 4 may occur based on commission direction. So that will.
But the
exactly-
motion is to approve the contract.
But it's the contract's before you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, correct. All right, so we have a motion on the floor, a second. We have to do a roll call?
No, it's a resolution. If you want to, you can.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries, and I'm appointing Gary and Barbara as the fundraising leaders.
You gotta do the announcements.
All right. For $10 a piece. All right, announcements.
Tuesday, May 19th, the Crime Watch meeting at 7 o'clock p.m. Wednesday, May 20th, Parks and Parkway Advisory Board at 6 o'clock p.m. Monday, May 25th, all village departments are closed for Memorial Day. Tuesday, May 28th, Recreation Advisory Board at 7 o'clock p.m. And Monday, June 1st, Planning and Zoning Board at 6:30 p.m. Our next regular commission meeting is Tuesday, June 2nd, 2015 at 7 o'clock p.m.
Madam Clerk, wonderful job tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you for coming.
Motion to adjourn?